Hello, my friend, and welcome to Pro Wrestling Daily. My name is Aaron Machbitz. The Karrion Kross drama continues. He was on a podcast trying to explain the whole situation, and I found a few key points very interesting. He was trying to express that the whole thing is not a work, it's very real. WWE offered him a contract, and he responded with that contract, like, what's the valuation? Like, how did you come to this number that you're giving me on the contract? They didn't offer it to his wife. I believe it was just Kross who got the contract, and he wanted to sort of maintain open lines of communication and dialogue, and he wanted to understand how WWE got to this number. I think that's a fair point. They never responded to that. They gave him 24 hours, the contract expired, and now we're here. And then he goes on a podcast, a very popular podcast, and he says this whole thing is not a work, it's real, it's a shoot, we're not trying to play anyone, all that sorts of stuff. And I think the most important sort of piece that Kross shared was that because of the Seth Rollins injury, because of the R-Truth, Ron Killing stuff, people don't know what to believe now. They don't know what's a work and what's a shoot. And so all this has got them wrapped up in the Karrion Kross situation because of the most recent Seth Rollins injury, where they worked everyone into a shoot and worked that into it, whatever the case may be, right? And then this whole thing with R-Truth and Ron Killings, like, well, was that a work? Was that part of the fans? Triple H said it was part of the show. It's not part of the show. The fans brought him back, the Seth Rollins thing. And now we're wrapped up in this whole Karrion Kross situation. And like me, I think it's still potentially a work, because why would they go through all of this trouble to just have all of these things dialed in? Bully Ray talking about it, right? Paul Heyman talking about it on the same podcast just a few days ago. Then Karrion Kross comes on and says, no, this is me, this is Kevin speaking, I'm talking to you guys as Kevin, this is not a work, it's a shoot, I'm telling you what really happened. And then he's airing out all this stuff that Triple H didn't like the promo post WrestleMania, and that Kross had to explain to Triple H that it was a work after WrestleMania. No, that was not a work after WrestleMania. That was as real and as authentic as you can get, and Triple H and some of the higher-ups were upset. Now the contract gets offered. He only has 24 hours to respond. The whole dialogue and chain of conversation goes away. He doesn't know why. His wife is gone. Now he's going on a huge, massive wrestling podcast, fighting podcast, and talking about it and saying R-Truth's injury, or Seth Rollins' injury, R-Truth's thing. No one knows what's a work, what's not a work, what's a shoot, what to believe. That's the whole point of professional wrestling. That's the whole point, is to suspend your disbelief. WWE has to come up with new ways now in this modern era where everything is out in the open. There's social media, right? What is WWE feeding the dirt sheets? What are the dirt sheets feeding you? It's all just this cycle. And yes, some things are absolutely real. I'm sure it's real right now for Kross that he really doesn't have a job. I'm sure massive promotions are all reaching out to him, like he said, except for AEW, because of the idea that some people still think it's a work, like myself. But that's the whole point of the business, to have these surprises, and you have to do things a little bit differently than you normally would to keep secrets, to have surprises, to build movements, to build quote-unquote organic movements. I think still at this very moment, they can still build an organic movement with Kross. I mean, we saw on the most recent edition of Monday Night Raw, there was a few "We Want Kross" signs. There was a few "We Want Kross" chants, but not big enough to erupt throughout the whole arena, and not big enough for everyone to start chanting that. It really does live on social media. It's a movement on social media, because that's where most of the sort of very loud internet wrestling community fans live, and sometimes that social media space doesn't really dictate what's happening in real life. But with Kross, that's the opposite, because his merch sales were on fire. And so what was ever happening online was also bleeding into real time, because people were making purchases with their money, and people speak with their money. And so because of what Bully Ray said about creating this movement online, maybe all of this is still being orchestrated. Or maybe I'm going to check back on this in a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 6 months from now and be like, damn, I was super wrong. Kross is working for a totally different organization, being Killer Kross in a totally different organization in TNA, whatever the case may be, in AEW, doing whatever he's doing. Or it's all going to come together and it's all going to start happening. Because yes, he was really heavily talked about on August 13th, filming this right now on August 14th, and that's the whole point. It's just a social media movement. WWE is not commenting on this. WWE hasn't talked about his release. WWE hasn't said anything about good luck in your future endeavors, all those things that they normally do for a big time release of a superstar because they want to look like sort of a virtuous company, even though WWE is not really a virtuous company. They're very greedy, but, love them nonetheless. And so I still think there's some very interesting things happening that potentially lead this to being a work, or at least this to being not Cross's final appearance in WWE. I think he will be back. He also stated that on the podcast that he's still open. He's still open and waiting for a contract, waiting for the lines of communication to continue so that he can get back to work, right? Jonathan Coachman said something very happy. You want people to want to stay, you want them to be happy, and you want them to be over. Those three things are usually what allow people to continue getting a contract with WWE. They want to stay. Cross definitely wants to stay. He was happy, seems happy with WWE and with the process. Yes, of course, he was frustrated by the fact that he wasn't getting a ton of opportunities or TV time, and he used that as a way to voice his frustrations post WrestleMania, and a lot of things have happened since then. I mean, he's been a topic of conversation almost every single day via what's going to happen, his contract, of movement, we want Cross, all these sorts of things. And because of that, he got over, which is the third thing. And those three reasons usually allow people to stay in WWE because that's what you want. You want them to stay. You want them to want to be there. You want them to be happy with the company and how it's going. And you want them to get over because that's what wrestling is all about. It's about getting over, interacting with the fans, creating a connection, an emotional connection with the fans. And Cross has done that via just himself. His authenticity shines through a lot of his promos. He made a really cool, documentary, maybe that has 1 million views now. And like all of these things lead to him going back into WWE. But the most important thing that came out of that was like, Cross says that people don't know what to believe because of the Seth Rollins injury, because of the R-Truth thing. Now, because of this, I think we will see Karrion Kross back in WWE again, and WWE is going to spin it in some way. But I think all of it somewhat orchestrated, somewhat a work. Some of it is very real and very raw. I'm sure the line of communication after the 24-hour contract expires was heartbreaking for Cross. He didn't get the valuation he wanted, and that sort of conversation ended. His wife wasn't offered a contract, so I'm sure some of that stuff is very, very real. But how are Cross and WWE going to orchestrate this to continue the movement going if Cross ever does enter back into a WWE ring, which I think he will. But let me know what you think in the comments down below. I'd absolutely love to hear from you. Then like this video, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you guys next time. Lots of love. Cheers.